What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Off the Ball podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. And on today's show, I have a special guest with me. I have Roland Lazenby, the author of Michael Jordan, The Life, also Mind Games with Phil Jackson's Long, Strange Journey, also Showboat, The Life of Kobe Bryant, and many, many more books. Roland, what's going on?
Oh, not much, Chris. I'm here working, and I've been writing about basketball for, 40 years. And I have all these cassette tapes of all of these. Everybody from Kareem, Bill Russell, Bill Sharman, Jim Pollard, and George Mikan. This stuff, I've got mountains of cassette tapes and I'm trying to sort through them today. So I'm taking a trip down memory lane, but mostly it's just cassette tapes as far as the landscape goes.
Yeah, that's just awesome. You're talking about legends, all those guys you mentioned, all legends you've talked about. So how many books have you written so far?
Well, there are different types of books. I've written a fair amount of text for picture books, but I've also written a lot, as you know, from reading Michael Jordan, The Life, which is 700 pages.
Yes.
I've also written some door stoppers.
Yeah.
There are lighter center blocks in some of my books. But I guess it all adds up to books I've contributed to and everything. I don't really know, somewhere north of 70.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of books.
Well, 40 years is a long time, and I'm a working writer.
Yeah.
So, if you're a brick mason, you sling a lot of mortar.
Yes.
If you're a writer, you sling a lot of words.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. So obviously, we talked a little bit before we got on about the, Michael Jordan, The Life, and just how, it's just you really got it really detailed from not just his playing days, but way back to before till his believe you get back to his great grandfathers around that time. Just talk about just how you got all that information and how were you able to get all that stuff too?
Well, I wrote a book on Jerry West for ESPN Books back in 2010. And my old man was one of these two-handed set shooters out of the West Virginia hills, and he, back in the 30s, but when they had a center jump after every basket. A lot of people don't realize in basketball, into the 30s, they used to score a basket and then go to center court and jump the ball, just like soccer or something.
Oh, so they would go right, they score and then go right to center court like a jump another jump ball.
Yeah,
I never knew that. That's crazy.
Yeah, the basketball, rules make big changes, and so anyway, Jerry West, of course, was from West Virginia, and he was my old man's one of his idols. And although he was younger than my old man played some semi-pro ball. So I wanted to tell the whole story of Jerry West's family. It's a big cultural thing.
Yeah.
All the hillbillies, and then I got hired to do Jordan's book, and I wanted to tell the story of all the sharecroppers and the moonshiners on the coastal plain that were Jordan's people. And I did a good bit of that with Kobe. I didn't go back quite so far when I did the Kobe book, but now I'm doing a book on Magic Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Man, I'm going through census records and death certificates.
That's wild.
And I'll tell you why. First of all, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
These players are big, a lot of times big cultural figures today. A guy like LeBron or Kobe. My Kobe book's in like 12 languages. My Jordan book is translated, I believe, into 16 languages. And these are important global figures. They're worshipped everywhere. And so part of that is that I want to tell the whole cultural story. Uh, it's also important to tell the story in terms of race,
Yes.
because this country has just evil, dastardly record in
Oh,
terms
yes.
of race, and it's suppressed with violence and enforced ignorance and servitude. And I'm not even talking about slavery. I'm talking about
Yeah.
the life of sharecroppers. I'm talking about the last 150 years since the Civil War,
Yeah.
the record of violence and every sort of violence. And so I want to tell the whole cultural story where I can. And I want to, there are a lot of people usually in families that have endured a lot. And I like to get an indication of that.
Hmm.
I think it makes victory bigger
Yeah.
uh, when when family is considered, when the hardship, the long hard road to sustain a family.
Yes.
I start Michael's book with his great grandfather, who was an only child, born in 1891, the year basketball was invented. His name is Dawson Jordan. He was 5'5" and crippled, but
Yeah.
he was a bad dude.
Yeah. It was tough.
And he fought through much as an only child, and he went through a lot of heartbreak, sorrow. The kind of heartbreak and sorrow, if there was anything available in abundance to sharecroppers of any race, but particularly African American sharecroppers, I mean, just the terrible conditions. If there
Hmm.
was anything in abundance for them, it was heartbreak and difficulty and sorrow. And I'm revisiting that in a different way. Magic Johnson's parents, his dad came from Mississippi, which, I mean, that place is off the chart in terms of the racial animus and violence. And like Michael, Magic's mother and all her people were from North Carolina. So I just like studying cultural patterns and telling the long game, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and what I also liked that you brought up in the book is how his mother, Michael Jordan's mother, and how she always, just always told him to, even with everything going on around that time, with all the racial tension and all that, that just, you don't judge people. You just, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether Latino, whether they're Asian, it doesn't matter. You treat them with respect and all that. And I mean, that was, that was a really telling thing, especially during that time where, she could have every reason to not, to hate. And she still, told Michael to just treat people with respect and all that. And I think that was something that came up in my head, when I read it. I'm like, oh, that's crazy that she still had that mindset to just treat people with respect no matter what.
Right. No, that's obviously a very important thing. I write a lot about mothers of great competitors. They're all different, but they're all perfectionists,
Hmm.
and they all they push their sons through that perfection. Tex Winter, the assistant coach of the Bulls and the Lakers, the triangle coach, my dear friend for years, he would talk about the perfectionism in the great players, that they all, it's just part of what drives them. And so writing these biographies is a cultural study. It's a study in all kinds of power, Black power, female power, and the power of these mothers to endure all kinds of stuff. Because so many of the people, Black or white or of any race in this country, uh, we don't understand today just how hard their lives were.
No, not at all.
The grind of being a farm wife, not to mention the grind of being a farmer. And a lot of women ended up, a lot of the men, a lot of the women died early, but so did a lot of the men. And so whoever was left had to continue with the farm. And as you go through census records, you just see a lot of broken and devastated families who endure. And I just want to champion those people. I think their stand, their determination to make a life is the only reason we're talking about these great players, these great competitors. And so I like to put it all out there. Some people don't like it. Some people say, man, I want to hoop. I do not want to hear all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I understand that. Go buy another book or skip the part of it. But that's not what I do. And that's not what I get paid to do.
Yeah.
And so I consider it important. And I have a lot of readers who tell me they do too. So, but if you don't, I understand. I don't take it personally. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I don't understand why people wouldn't like that to know about his upbringing and his his grandfather, his grandparents, and how they, because that's how that's kind of how you're built as a person, with your grandparents, and stuff. So I don't know why people wouldn't find that interesting. I find it fascinating so far, and I told you before, I'm still fairly in the beginning of the book, but just reading it, I just find all that stuff fascinating about his grandparents. And
well, our racial history in this country is very painful.
Yeah.
And it is hard for people, and so some people find it hard to read about, others find it illuminating. I really just think it's important that all together we understand our racial history and consider it in the context of the lives of these great competitors. And I just think it's a good way to keep us all moving together forward. That's just my approach. And, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's you also brought up is a situation where when he was younger, and I forgot that he had a friend who was white, and they go into a pool, right? They sneak into a neighbor's pool and they get caught.
Yeah.
And they get told to leave and stuff, and then his friend is looking. I'm like, why is he looking upset? Thinking maybe it's because of because he's black, and he just says, well, at least I got hydrated or something, right? I believe it was something like that. And I thought that was hysterical because it has you thinking that he's sad about maybe because it's something racial, but he's like, at least I got cool,
Yeah.
and I thought that was a pretty cool thing you wrote.
And those two kids, or Michael and that guy, are good friends. They play a lot of baseball together, and they get in a lot of fights. They just knew how to punch each other's buttons.
Yeah.
But
that was funny though. I love.
Yeah, but when you have a friend, it doesn't matter. When you have a friend, you don't have to. You got sort of a radar on. If you have a friend who's another ethnicity than you are, and they're a good friend, you don't even have to talk about stuff. You can sense if something's going on.
Yeah.
And that's part of friendship.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, that was a good, and the fact that, like I said, with everything going on during that time, that the friend didn't care whether he was black, about his skin. That's his friend,
Well, that's the great thing about friendship.
Yep. He didn't see color at all. He just, so that's my friend. We get along, and that's it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. My life, I've had so many mentors of all kinds of races and ethnicities, people who have helped me a lot. I mean, major ways in my life.
Yeah.
And so, that to be mindful of that is important for me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I also want to get into, his competitiveness shows early in this book too, because he has a lot of battles with his brother Larry that you highlight in the book, and just a lot of back and forth, a lot of some physical. I mean, he probably got some Jordan rules before Jordan rules existed.
Right. It was a very physical contest, and
Yeah,
Larry was older and stronger. Michael was taller and weaker. And Larry, his brother, 11 months older, was much favored
yeah, by his
by
dad.
their father, James Jordan. And that's really the hardwiring of Michael's life.
Hmm.
You
It
know,
translates to today, that mentality, like that.
oh
Trying
yeah, no, it's
to,
everything. And
yeah.
I really didn't understand my own life and the impact of my father over me
Hmm.
until I wrote that book.
Yeah.
Now I understood pieces of it, but the whole thing didn't go ding
Hmm.
until you know and obviously there was pretty quickly in things a point where Michael Jordan's father stopped disapproving of him and just fell in love with everything he was
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
and was immensely proud of him. But that didn't matter.
Hmm.
That switch had already been flipped in MJ, and it was radioactive. And he spent the rest of his life sort of proving, sort of shouting across time at his old man, even though they loved each other and MJ loved his father. But when you're making that kind of point, when you're answering that kind of disapproval, it is amazing. And families are different in many ways, but there's so many similarities in things.
Hmm.
And I just found all of that fascinating.
Yeah, that's the fact that he felt that even at an early age, that Larry might have been getting more favoritism, and there's also instances where it shows that his father would work on cars and stuff, and if they weren't really into it, he would just tell them to go hang with the ladies, hang with the
Yeah,
in the
when
household
you
too.
think about it, an adolescent kid, a young kid being told that,
Yeah,
and your parents say a lot to you, but the sentence you remember is that.
yeah,
And, Michael didn't like mechanics. His only job throughout was he had a job for 1 week, his whole teen years. And he quit it after a week. He was afraid people would see him work, and he had to clean up around his swimming pool and this restaurant. And it's funny, but in the Cape Fear Museum down in Wilmington, they've got Michael Jordan's pay stub from the 1 week that he worked his entire life. Is that crazy?
that's insane. I'm sure it wasn't much either.
No, it was back in the 70s.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy for sure. But yeah, wow, I'm still thinking that's crazy that they have his pay stub. That's definitely a nice piece of history to have, for sure. To have his first pay stub.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I would love to get more into the book, but that's kind of where I'm at right now with the book. So I don't want to.
That's totally cool. There's a 700-page book is really about 3 books.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I've read some 1,000-page books in my life. I remember them all because there are not too many of them. But the ones that I'll go ahead and read that much. That's why I'm very appreciative of anyone who does, because it's a slog to get through a 700-page book.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, if it was one thing, if it start off and it's just boring, and then you want to get into it. But if it's interesting, like the way you've you've made it, it's going to grab the reader, and it's grabbed me. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest reader of books, but if I see something I like, and I'm a big Michael Jordan fan, and so I saw your book and I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And I started reading it this week, and it's been something that I'm going to continue to read, day by day and till to the end. And like I said, it's so far, it's fascinating so far, especially going through, his young stages and before he was even born.
Yeah, I was not a great student.
Neither was
And
I.
and so you know, I learned from doing interviews. I like that active means of learning. And I ended up teaching college. And for somebody who never had good grades, that's kind of weird. But I was.
Great. That's great though.
It is. But I used to have to teach high school and coach, and I had never been a good student, so I had to become better just to try to get the teaching done.
Mm-hmm.
But so I see a lot of that. It's strange. One, that I ended up teaching college, and two, that I ended up writing very long books that would be hard for me to read.
Like I said, it's very interesting so far. So how long does it take to, how long did it take to get everything together for this book and then finally get it to publish and all that? How long is that process?
Well, it's different because I spent a lot of time. I've written a lot of books about basketball, but a lot about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan. I spent a lot of time with him.
No. Okay.
I spent the 90s, big chunk of the 90s with him through his time there. And so it's a cumulative thing on one hand, but then when you set out to put their whole life and all the detail you can assemble with all the context. And the important thing is we live in a world without a lot of context.
Yes.
It's Twitter, it's Facebook messages,
For
60 characters or whatever, and you're talking about, I don't know, 200,000 words in this book, maybe more. I have no idea. 700 pages, about 200,000 words, maybe.
Yeah.
And so there's, you couldn't do that with everybody, but like I said, he's an important figure. I will tell you, I do think when I first started doing books, I wanted to do a book on a young Black man. And I approached a publisher. This was in 1982. And the publisher said, well, we don't do a whole lot of books on Black people. And this was 82. The world had moved along a little since then. And I just thought, it's ridiculous. And of course, when they started doing books about and by and for African Americans, guess what happened with all those books?
Yeah.
A lot of them became bestsellers.
Yeah.
And they are, it was just the classic example to me of how absolutely stupid racism is.
No, it's ridiculous. It's sickening.
And so trying to write about it is, I don't know. I think it's part of the mission.
Yeah. I mean, that's great that you had that mindset back in the 80s when people were doubting that, writing about people of color wouldn't sell. So, I mean, that's, kudos to you that's wonderful that you had that mindset even, in the 80s.
The great Ralph Wiley, who's a Black sports writer, wrote a book called Why Black People Tend to Shout. And I'll never forget it. It was a great book, but it was a great title too. It was just sort of sum things up in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely got to look into that. But just a few more things before I let you go.
Sure.
So obviously we know Jordan retired, in '93, and then came back in '95. How much of a difference was Jordan, from the first three-peat to the second three-peat, as far as being a player, a person? How much difference was there in those two eras of Jordan?
There were tremendous difference. First of all, his father had been murdered.
Yeah.
And that's number one on the list. And he was tremendously angry. He came back an angry dude. And he was never the easiest guy to get along with anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But he came back and, he had a scene. He had a turnover against Orlando in the playoffs, in the '95 playoffs. And it cost them. He had some play at the end of a game, a critical game that cost them, and they got beat by Orlando. And that mirrored the last game of his high school career, when his Laney high school team had like a 6-point lead. There was no three-pointer. There was no shot clock. And they had a 6-point lead with about a minute to go. And Michael screwed up, had a couple of turnovers and fouled out, and they lost.
Yeah.
And from what we know generally about his competitive nature. So, I mean, it began with the murder of his father. You can get angry just losing a loved one.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that feeling.
But to have your loved one be a murder victim.
Yeah.
And so he came back. He was angrier, but there was more to help him with that. Phil Jackson had brought in George Mumford, who was a mindfulness expert. George became a dear friend of mine, still is. And he was an African-American mindfulness expert. He was Buddhist. Obviously not Buddhist in religious faith, but all of the Zen stuff he knew. They called Phil Jackson the Zen master, but it was really George Mumford, who's a brilliant man. I'm not sure there's, speaking of reading books, I'm just not sure if there are books he hasn't read. I'll talk to that guy on the phone. I talk to him every couple of weeks on the phone. We're the same age. And he was Dr. J's roommate at the University of Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
And so this guy is, but anyway, George Mumford really began to teach that meditation. And it was a big point for Phil, because the whole idea of meditation is to learn to be in the moment. And we'll probably see MJ on The Last Dance here talk about it as he wins that championship. He's talking about, I was in the moment. I'm in the moment. And that is the training, the mental training. If you're thinking about the mistake you just made, and that's particularly true in basketball, where if you make a mistake at one end of the floor and you keep thinking about it, you get to the other end of the floor, you're going to make another mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it interrupts your mental flow. And George Mumford, years later, Jordan invited him down to Florida, took him to dinner. George had the same impact on Kobe Bryant. I introduced him to Kobe Bryant in 1999 when Kobe was lost and lonely. George, when Kobe, after he retired, he flew George out to Southern California and rode him around on that damn helicopter. But George was so important. And what George did, as Jordan explained it, when George Mumford began working with him, he said, man, I wish I'd known you earlier in my career. I wouldn't have been a prisoner in my hotel room all those years.
Wow.
But I will tell you that the anger with Jordan continued. This was, it was an angry team, and there was anger between Krause and Jordan, tremendous anger between Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause.
Yes.
I sort of was in the middle of it doing interviews and sort of playing messenger boy for their anger. They would tell me things about each other in interviews with the idea that it was sort of they were slinging mud balls at each other, shit balls. And so it was an angry time. And they were winning.
Yeah.
And Phil Jackson used their anger to drive them. And Jordan, he just was a ferocious guy. I had to work hard when I would get to talk with him to ask him about it. And it was always a challenge. Anyway, that sort of is a great question. There was a definite before and after, excuse me.
Yeah. And and you say like this, so there was so much anger with those teams, but I think that I don't think, especially with Phil Jackson, and people don't appreciate his greatness. And I think with the Last Dance documentary, it's really shown that how really great of a coach and he was, as far as dealing with Michael, and dealing with Dennis and all his stuff, and then dealing with Scotty, and then dealing with Jerry Krause, and all those egos, and trying to deal. That's not easy to deal with.
Yeah, I do
people
have
think
to
it's easy,
say,
but it's not.
I do have to say, and this is the message I learned from so many and learned from watching it. Phil's a very good coach.
Yes, very.
But there was a reason he was able to do that. And that's because he was dealing with coaching Michael Jordan. Yeah. And Michael Jordan was such a badass, such a tough guy. The whole point of my book, Blood on the Horns, about that season, that book came out in 1998. But the whole point is everybody wanted to please MJ. Mm-hmm. And he was all over them. They were scared of it. And as much as Krause despised MJ and MJ despised Krause, there had been this thing in Krause where he wanted to argue with MJ, but he wanted to please him, and even the owner. And so they were all at odds in one way or another. But Dennis Rodman wasn't going to mess with MJ. Now, I had been in Spurs camp writing a lot about the Spurs when Dennis was down there with David Robinson. And David Robinson, he's a guy 1,400 on his SATs. He's built like an onyx Adonis. There's nothing David Robinson can't do.
No. Specimen.
And Dennis Rodman had very little respect for him because he just did not have this great work ethic. But when it came to Jordan, Rodman, as Steve Kerr explained to me, and as I saw, I'd known Rodman. I used to do a lot of Pistons work, and Rodman was a relationship guy, had a great relationship with Chuck Daly. Mm-hmm. And Rodman was very deferential to MJ. And MJ could straighten his ass out. And there was a lot, Phil couldn't handle MJ. That's a lot of the problem that happened to the Bulls. He used all that anger, Phil did, to keep the team focused. But he really could not stop MJ from abusing Jerry Krause. And that's how Krause, you don't see that. You don't really see what happened in '97 during the playoffs. They haven't gotten into that, but it was on the team bus. Krause was badly abused by MJ. And so that's why I wanted, when we opened The Last Dance, you see that he wants to trade Scotty and he wants to fire Phil immediately in the summer of '97. He's just been abused by MJ on the team bus with everybody laughing at him and Phil sitting there powerless to stop it.
That's crazy. Yeah, he definitely gets on Jerry Krause a lot, especially you've seen a doc. He gets on him a lot.
Yeah, you don't really see how bad and how disrespectful it was.
Did you see it personally? Like, Michael?
No, all my sources came to me and told me about it, and I reported it. Blood on the Horns was a big book for what it was. The Sun Times ran excerpts for 10 days. It was on all its newspaper boxes. It was #1 on USA Today. There was a lot of shocking stuff there. But, that time passes and people forget all that stuff. But MJ has shown some of his bad behavior.
Yeah.
He didn't show that.
Yeah, he definitely shows some stuff that people won't like from
Right. I'm the only one to ever report that, and that may be part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So one last thing I want to actually, Jordan and Kobe. They obviously Kobe gets a lot of references to Jordan as being the closest thing to him. Did Jordan did Jordan know that this was the next guy that could possibly take over the league? Did he know Kobe was that guy? Because it kind of seems like, especially in the doc and stuff and stuff I've read, it always felt like he knew Kobe was the next guy, even though that he was so young and coming out of high school, but he still felt like this guy is going to be the next guy. Was that the feeling?
Well, Sonny Vaccaro, the kingmaker from Nike, who
Yeah.
really was the guy that made Air Jordan happen for Nike. Fired Sonny, and they don't like to give him credit, but I have all the documentation, I have all the people there. It was Sonny Vaccaro. And after Nike fired him, he went looking for the next Jordan. He was trying to get all these kids to turn pro out of high school. Kobe Bryant wasn't even on the radar.
Yeah, he wasn't even ranked as like a junior, I believe. It wasn't until his senior year where he got #1, right? It was.
Oh, and right, but he was ranked compared to Jordan, who had nothing as a junior.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe had recognition; he began to get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that after his sophomore year, Kobe's dad just took him to Sonny Vaccaro's camp and begged to get in, and that was an invitation camp to his game. And Sonny Vaccaro had known Joe Bryant, so he let Kobe in. And Kobe had just played really well at age 15, and these were against the top seniors in a junior or two in the country. And Kobe went up to Sonny Vaccaro afterward and said, "Mr. Vaccaro, I wasn't the best player in the camp this year, but I promise you next year I'm going to be." And it just knocked Vaccaro over. This is that guy who has that Jordan swagger, that it factor, and obviously the work ethic. And, I was there for all those games when Kobe would take on Jordan in the garbage minutes. And it was obvious. Kobe came in as a rookie and, the veteran Lakers team.
Yeah. Eddie Jones,
He was a maniac. He put pressure on everybody. Those veterans didn't like him because he would embarrass them. And of course, that's what Jordan did. He came in as a young player and just embarrassed the living shit out of the veterans in Chicago. And so they were different. Kobe got the message from Adidas, who was Sonny Vaccaro's shoe company he represented by then. He got the message they expected him to be the next Jordan. Mm-hmm. You tell a 15-year-old kid that. That's what he starts doing, acting like it.
Yeah.
But Kobe's thing was organic. It was not about pretending to be Jordan.
Yeah.
He just wanted to beat him but I have stories I've told a lot, but they had tremendous respect for each other. As much respect as two stone cold competitors can have.
Oh, of course. Two of the greatest competitors, not just in basketball, but just in sports, period.
In 2008, when Kobe was on his way to winning the league MVP, I was sitting with Michael in the pre-draft camp at Orlando. Just me and Michael up in the upper part of the arena watching college players trying out down below. And I asked Michael about a lot of things, but I asked him about Kobe, and it was obvious from his voice the regard he had for Kobe. And, he said Kobe's the guy who'd done all the work. Then I went out to LA. I was in the Lakers locker room. They were in the playoffs. Kobe was sitting across the locker room from me tying his shoes. I was talking to somebody else. And I said, Kobe, I've been talking to Mike about you. And his ears perked up like a little kid. You know, he went, what? What did he say? You know, he's just eager. And they're a club of two. They played in that same offense. They played for the same coaches.
Yeah.
The offense was run a little differently in LA than it was in Chicago. And they were different players. But Tex Winter used to marvel at how great they both were.
Yeah, like it's just crazy how a lot of his moves and his persona and his swagger is just so Jordan like. It's like a carbon copy, though, and it's probably why they got along so well, because they were kind of the same person almost, you know, just that killer mentality.
But a lot of it was the offense. You know, the triangle is a two-guard front. It has two guards at the top instead of one. And they make that first pass, and one of the guards goes over, or one of the wing players. It's got two guards and it's got two wings, foul line extended. And one of them goes and fills the corner, usually the best shooter. So you suddenly got an unbalanced floor. And Michael and Kobe would usually be attacking from the weak side, because over there you couldn't double team them.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only, it wasn't just Kobe copying Michael, he was playing the same position the same way, basically an attack position in a very unusual offense. And so they were a club of two.
Yeah.
Other guards of their caliber, or other guards who might have been somewhat close to their caliber, never got to play in that offense like that. They were the guys dialed in to do it.
Yeah, those are definitely the guys riled up to do it for sure. They were, like I said, two of the greats to have ever laced up a pair of sneakers, and the fact that they, you know, like I said, very similar in playing style, but then also they went with Phil. You know, they had Phil as their coach, so they, you know, just those philosophies. They, you know, it's just crazy how they just, everything comes full circle, and they're like so similar.
Yep.
So this was a tremendous conversation, Roland. I really appreciate it. But I want to ask you
I enjoyed it too, Chris. Thank you.
Yes, I want to ask you a couple quick questions, fast-paced questions, and before I let you go, okay?
Sure.
So, who's on your Mount Rushmore of NBA players?
Gosh, I don't rank them. I don't get into that.
No, okay.
I'll tell you why. They're all different. They're all great. I'm just a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. These guys played 12, 15, like Kobe, 20 years. Night after night, laying their hearts on the line. I'm not that guy. I'm not going to come in.
Yeah. Okay.
And say, oh, this one's better than that one.
It's so hard to do that.
That's BS. Each of what those guys did stands for itself, you know? And so fans will figure out who they appreciate. And it's even tougher across generation, because they've totally ginned up the game today. That, you know, you can't run the triangle. They've changed all the rules.
Yeah, they can't do
and they eliminated, the triangle was a big team play thing. Yeah. But they've eliminated team play from basketball today, and they did it in the rules. So I can't really compare even LeBron James, who's a great player. I can't compare him to yesteryear, because he's playing a very different game under a very different set of rules.
Very different set of rules. Pretty much no defense.
Right. But the big things, they cut the timeline down to 8 seconds. Yeah. And then the reset is 14 seconds on an offensive rebound. And those two things meant you can't set up the triangle and run it. And see, they allowed the game to be shaped by the people who couldn't beat Tex Winter and Phil Jackson, couldn't beat Jordan and Kobe and Shaq and Scotty. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it is, in my mind, a reaction to how the game was played. Phil Jackson's not liked by a lot of coaches in the NBA. Wasn't. And they basically took system offense. System offense is different than other things. In Utah, San Antonio, a lot of different teams had run system offenses.
Yeah.
San Antonio's different. Their half court game was so beautiful. It used to be like a fast break in the half court, but the NBA has eliminated all that. And the thing is, they've made lots of money doing it.
Oh yeah.
They have lots of stats freaks. The game's run by mathematicians.
Yeah.
I just want them to keep a fair and open set of rules and let the best win, but that's not what it is.
Yeah, for sure. So what players do you like watching now?
I try to like it. No, it's just they've it's a false thing.
Yeah.
It's a false thing they've done to the game.
Yeah.
And if you talk to the older players, I mean, it's just ridiculous. They have set it all up. It's just a very different game. You can see great players. I enjoy LeBron. Doncic's interesting. He's a little too close to James Harden for my taste.
Okay.
LeBron played under the old rules, so he still has some of that in him. Steph Curry, I tremendously admire Klay Thompson.
Yes, he's tremendous.
Got a lot of heart.
Two-way player too.
Yeah, I like that. And so, no, there's stuff. I'm
sure you don't like that the big man is kind of fading away.
Well, that's what they did. They changed all the rules. You can't touch a guard or a wing, but they've made it possible just to keep pounding the big man in the post. The whole game today is built on Mike D'Antoni's philosophy. He hates post play, and so they cut the heart out of post play. There's no more post play. If it was just NBA rules, I'd say go ahead, make your money. But it has changed youth basketball. It has changed. AAU basketball has changed. High school, it has changed college. They have made this ridiculous and butt ugly. Now, when it's pretty, it's pretty. But the team that has dominated the most in this ginned up game is Golden State, and they use pieces of system offenses.
Yeah.
But that's all they can use because the shot clock is so screwed up.
Yeah.
And all the various time factors. They've rushed the game to give no time for defense and to get all these shots jacked up. And, everybody has a different opinion, but you ask mine, it's butt ugly.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't like the fact that the big man is kind of getting faded away. It's kind of
course.
hard
It's I don't know. I don't know. But, it's funny that Mike D'Antoni, who's never won anything, one of the nicest people on the planet. I mean, I love the guy. But, I've told him this. He's never won anything. And even with the rules set up the way he wants them now, he still can't win.
Yeah.
And so why would they take a coach who could never beat the other system and adopt his system for the whole NBA? It's infuriating.
I guess
that's a story for another day, but thanks for listening to that.
Yeah, I guess because points is sexy. That's what people like seeing. 147, 130 points, 80 point for halves. People just like scoring, and
it's just ginned up stuff.
Yeah, it just got jacked up though.
It's most of the old timers and people from the 80s and 90s and even the early part of this century. And really up through about 2013, they began changing in 05 and 06.
Yeah.
But it really is not something they will sit and watch.
Yeah. You know
It's
what I think
the
it's funny?
highlights.
You know
They
what?
distribute the game today with a lot of phone highlights and
Yeah,
sports center highlights. And
Instagram highlights and all that stuff is that's the cool thing, seeing guys, mixtapes of all these high school kids just dunking and stuff. That's the cool thing. That's what get views. That's what get
and
views.
it's the views and the stats,
Yeah,
but the game itself,
it's deteriorating.
yeah. There's still many great players today, and the athletes greater. But you know, anyway, that's my take.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. But Roland, this was tremendous. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Sure. Thank you for your
Was a lot
interest,
of
Chris.
fun. No, this
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, appreciate you
Well,
coming on, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of your book, which I'm really stoked to read all of
well, buckle your chin strap. It's a hoss.
it. Yes,
But you stay well, and everybody you know, and everyone who listens to your podcast, I'm asking you all to be careful.
yes, I appreciate it. Where can people find, your books, or do you have a website you can plug if you wanted to say that?
The books are all over the world in all kinds of languages.
Yeah.
The some are harder to find than others, but the Michael Jordan, The Life, and Showboat, The Life of Kobe Bryant are both, they're everywhere. All the platforms. Amazon has not been refilling its book supplies. It's so busy selling other stuff right now. So Barnes and Noble is actually a place. A lot of the basketball books have sold out on Amazon. They haven't replenished yet, but Barnes and Noble has a lot of them. So, and there are different places, but Barnes and Noble is a big thing. You can even go by the Barnes and Noble and pick them up like groceries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big thing. And so both of my Kobe and Jordan book are in every Barnes and Noble in America.
That's awesome. That's the next thing after I finish the Jordan, I'm gonna get to that Kobe book. That's definitely that's next on.
And you're going to be reading forever then.
Yeah.
That Kobe book is 600 pages. So
Okay. Yep.
anyway, thank you, Chris.
No, I thank you so much. This was a pleasure, and I could talk to you for hours because you just you have just so much knowledge and so much, you've seen everything in basketball. So
it's a lot of hot air. Thank you for saying that.
No, it's my pleasure. Like I said, thank you again for coming on, and I'm sure my listeners are going to definitely look forward to listening to this podcast. So once again, thank you for coming on. I hope to have you on again. We can talk a little bit more about some more stuff because we can talk for hours. But Roland, thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay safe with everything.
Happy to do it, man.
Yes. Thank you so much. All right, so take care, guys.
See you.